Well, hi. Hi, I'm Tim Blunk. I'm the director of, at this point, Virtual Gallery Bergen, although we are hoping to be back on the third floor of West Hall on the campus of Bergen Community College in Paramus, New Jersey, hoping we'll be back very soon. I'm so glad that you're here to join us this evening for the virtual opening of our new show entitled Black Lives Matter at BCC, Photographs from the Life of Protest. And this amazing collection of photographs comes from a family of photographers who all participated in the Black Lives Matter protests beginning in May in Minneapolis and also in Brooklyn, New York. Their names are Rowin, Denise, and Rae Breaux, and they have different histories, which we'll get into. We're going to see some interviews with Rae Breaux. An interview with his mother, Denise, is also on our website, which is blm@bcc.com. We'll also have some interviews with two longtime political activists, friends of mine, one who you may have heard of. His name is Jamal Joseph. He is now a professor of film at Columbia University, and in a previous life, he was a member of the Black Panther Party. He was the youngest member of the famous case called the Panther 21 that went on trial. And later, after a long and interesting life and sojourn through the movement, he did time in prison at Leavenworth, which is actually where I got to know him. And he became an actor in prison, and when he got out, he became an award-winning film director, a documentary filmmaker, and a teacher at Columbia, and he is also the director of an award-winning program called Project Impact in Harlem for young people. It's a young people's theater group. We're going to have an interview, or excerpts of an interview with him. Also, an interview with another friend of mine from the movement from long ago. He is a professor of African American Studies at Georgia State University. His name is Akinyele Umoja. He is also one of the co-founders of the Malcolm X grassroots movement. And again, we'll see excerpts of an interview with Akinyele and myself. And we will be looking at photographs this evening. We have some music from our faculty. And I just want to get right into it and start to show you some work. But first, what I would like to show you is something that we are going to beginning to do with our programs here at Bergen. This is what we would call a land acknowledgement. And you'll see from the text on the screen there, a land acknowledgement is something that actually began in Canada in around 2015 after a Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations that the Canadian people began to recognize the history of Indigenous peoples and the presence and history and continuing legacy and oppression and struggles of the Indigenous peoples in Canada. And those of us who are in academia, we've been seeing some of these events, conferences begin with these kinds of land acknowledgements, recognizing Indigenous peoples, and the lands in which many of these state universities and colleges are built are on lands that were previously lived upon and worked and inhabited by Indigenous peoples, and we need to recognize that history. So this acknowledgement that we're going to begin this evening with recognizes the particular Indigenous presence of people who were known to the Dutch and early settlers in New Jersey as the Lenni Lenape. They were actually not known to themselves as that, although the smaller bands of these people were Algonquin-speaking peoples. The folks who lived in Bergen County, in that area that was settled by the Dutch, were Munsee speakers. They resided in Hackensack. Paramus is actually a word from Algonquin, from Munsee, that means land of turkeys, wild turkeys. So this is the presence. This is the presence of indigenous peoples on this land, and also particularly because we're doing this program about Black History Month, about Black Lives Matter, we need to acknowledge the particular history of slavery in Bergen County, which is rarely discussed, rarely acknowledged, particularly in histories of New Jersey. Most of what is discussed is the Underground Railroad, which in point of fact actually made wide berths around New Jersey because until the Civil War, New Jersey respected the fugitive slave laws. So most of the places that are on the Underground Railroad that have to do with the state of New Jersey are along the Delaware or the Hudson River. But in Bergen County, we had the largest population of slaves of any county in New Jersey, and there were particularly large presences of slaves on the farms of the Dutch. Most of the street names that you see in Bergen County that have Dutch names attached to them were farmers, and most of them were slaveholders. There were up to 20% of the population of Bergen County in 1820 were slaves. So we acknowledge that, and we acknowledge that the land that our college is built on is also steeped in the legacy of colonialism and slavery, and that the work that we do is inspired by those struggles and inspired by a vision of the future that seeks to redress reparations, that seeks to restore the true dignity of everyone and respects the history of our community. So that is our acknowledgement, and that's the spirit with which we begin this program. What I'm going to do now is begin an interview with Rae Breaux, who is a young photographer, and he is actually more known as an actor. You'll find out in the interview. Rowin is a young person who happened to be in Minneapolis pursuing his acting career when the George Floyd shooting, or actually the George Floyd murder occurred, and was there and needed to participate. He didn't really consider himself an activist at the beginning of that, but seemed to become one in the process, as many young people did, and older people as well. So we're going to begin with this interview with Rowin. He is going to show us some of his slides, which maybe you saw at the beginning of the program, but you'll get a chance to hear him describe the circumstances of some of these images that he took, which are really quite extraordinary. So here's our interview. Well, I'm so happy to be here with you, Rowin, and I'm grateful for your time, and even more so, I'm grateful for your stunning photographs from the Black Lives Matter demonstrations from Minneapolis. And I know you define yourself principally as an artist, actor, but you have a brilliant photographic eye. And I remember seeing your images on Facebook, and I thought, well, this must be a professional practicing photographer who's been recording these images from the demonstrations. And I reached out through our mutual friend, and I was so happy that you were willing to participate in this, and I'm really grateful. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the background of your involvement in the George Floyd demonstrations, and what brought you to make the images that you did? How did you see yourself in that context?
Sure. Um, that's actually a really good question because I think, well, I guess I would like to first mention, I think yesterday was supposed to be George Floyd's 47th birthday, so we're doing this on a very important one, day after an important day. But yeah, I moved to Minneapolis in 2018, I think it was, or 2017. And just to kind of pursue acting. I'm from California originally and just kind of wanted to try something new. So I found myself there. I was working at Minneapolis Children's Theater Company for 2018 to 2019, their season, excuse me. And so when COVID hit, I was just finishing being a child kind of mentor with one of their productions, and then George Floyd passed. And it was kind of an interesting decision to go out on the first march. I invited my mom and my girlfriend, and my mom was a little bit was a little bit on the edge, kind of just because of COVID at the time. And I was like, Mom, as a Black man, I kind of guilt her into doing it. I was like, this is important to me. And then luckily now, after the fact, she's like, it's probably one of the best decisions to go out there, she said, because who would not want to be part of that history when you're right in the middle of it? But yeah, so we went out on the march, and the thing that's interesting looking out on it after the fact is, like, of course, none of us had any idea how much this was going to blow up. And when it comes to just me taking pictures, I went out that night, actually the night after the first march. And the funny thing is that my mom, my girlfriend and I, we had no idea where the march was going. It turns out it was going to that 3rd precinct. Started at where he died and went off to where he was murdered, and went to the 3rd precinct. We had no idea at the time, so we kind of were like, okay, we've been out here for an hour, don't really know where it's going, so we're going to go home. But after that, I went out probably at around midnight, and that's when I took my first round of pictures. And I guess I admit I didn't really have, like, I'm doing this for a purpose. I just kind of brought my iPhone and was taking pictures of all the fires going on. Being in the middle of it, it wasn't something where I was like, this is a historic moment, I have to document it, you know. It was more a moment of, I'm in this, I'm going to document it for myself. And as the days progressed, it was pretty obvious how important independent media is and was down on the ground. I'm not calling myself an independent, a part of the independent media, but being down in the middle of, in Minneapolis, protesting in front of the 5th and 3rd precincts, taking pictures, being around all the so-called looting, protests, everything. I got a clear picture of what was going on, but then when I watched the mainstream media, I was like, this is, my friends, my family in California are getting a very different picture about what's actually going on. And that's when I started to think that posting my images of what's actually going on down on the ground will be, beneficial to both my own mentality, and people who don't necessarily know that independent media is out there and they go for, the CNN and the Fox Newses. But there are so many other things out there that give you a bigger, more realistic picture of what's going on.
What do you think some of the differences are between what you saw and what was being portrayed on places like Fox and CNN? What were some of the differences that you perceived?
I think when you're down on the ground, or at least when I was in the middle of all of that, you're not really thinking about the political side of it, and I think obviously from Fox, but from CNN too, there, you're gonna get a liberal versus a conservative opinion, and I guess in a way from me as well. But when you're taking pictures, they're not going to necessarily say one thing is liberal or one thing is conservative. I think also especially the first night I was down near the third precinct, I believe it was, or the fifth, now I'm forgetting. But, there are kids down there. There are 12-year-olds, down there hanging out, just kind of, because there's no school, because it's COVID, there's nothing else to do. Let's go look at all the riots and everything. I think that is still being overlooked. The fact that lots of this was just brought sadly out of boredom of COVID, but I also think that the boredom of COVID spurred the interest and the ability to be at these protests. And I think, I don't know if I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, it's basically, to go back to your question, pardon me, that's the main difference, is it's not politically driven when you're down fighting for your life or fighting for your rights,
Right. Well, why don't we take a look at some of your images, and let's then you can then tell us about some of the background of these and some of the circumstances. I think that'll be of interest to folks. So.
Yes. So this image was taken a few days after the first protest. It is down at the Cup Foods where he was murdered. There was a memorial set up for him. I'm not sure if it's still there now. I think there was talk about they had some community protection out there. But there is this beautiful gathering of people of color at this site, and instead of they were celebrating his life. There were a lot of young performers. As you see, there's, I believe, actually this is not the image I thought it was, but I feel like there's an image coming up that there's the three young girls that were dancing to some music, and there was just a huge it was just a lot. It was really nice to come to a community full of people of color that was preaching about love during this hard time. Especially when 2 blocks away there were riots, and the store I was working at the time got looted 2 nights in a row. So it was. And speaking of the media, which we were just talking about, of course there were no big cameras down at this this peaceful protest or peaceful gathering. So that was also very telling.
So that's one of the differences with what you choose to focus on, and what's seen and what's not seen, what's pictured, what's not, and what's left out is always telling.
Exactly. This is actually one of my favorite pictures. This is right outside the governor's mansion. This is right after Minneapolis was occupied by the National Guard. My mom also was with me on this day, and we walked past a probably about, I would say, 15 to 20 National Guard, just on the streets of Minneapolis, which was so odd that, a week before I was just walking down without any of this occupation, without it being occupied. And of course, my mom, being my mother, would be, she was talking to a lot of the younger National Guard guys, and they were very respectful. It was really eye opening for me to remind myself that, like, okay, these are just kids that are my age, if probably not younger. A lot of Black kids out there, but yeah, this is from that day right after the National Guard came in.
Interesting.
There were a lot of this is a very ironic picture. There were, because of all the looting, and there was a lot of confusion about who was doing the looting. Lots of people were talking about white supremacists were coming from the suburbs. There was a lot of talk about the KKK were around. No pictures necessarily, but a lot of Black-owned businesses were putting up signs and flags to say that they were Black-owned, in case that would possibly that the looting might move towards, I guess, a non-Black-owned store, which came into more question when the white supremacists were found out to be doing a lot of the looting. But this, I thought, was a very ironic picture with the grill there.
Right. I thought that was, you had a really great eye with this, and I definitely caught the irony when I saw it, and that's always a discussion when they talk about, quote unquote looting, which is often referred to as well as opportunistic expropriation, or of the sort of redress of grievances, and it's often the businesses that are targeted in communities, often as not, are places that are owned by people who don't live in the community, who often don't hire people in the community, and it's not to say that might be the preferred form of protest, but at the same time, once the fire gets lit, it's, you want to control the flames. You should have been redressing this set of grievances further back if you didn't want this.
Exactly.
So
it's kind of like, in a way, 200 years ago, it's like you enslaved people. What did you think would happen? It's
right.
just like, of course, businesses should not be looted, businesses should not be burned, but people should not be enslaved, and you can't overlook that either. And the fact that this country has overlooked it is why this happened. So it was one of those things where my store was looted, and the employee side of me was like, okay, I'll help clean up afterwards, but the second side was like, I don't, everyone's angry. No one got hurt. Like, sorry you lost some money, but people are angry.
Exactly. The primacy of property is just always stunning in these situations. It's like, we're gonna kill people, and then how many dozens and dozens of folks were then arrested in the process of these demonstrations, and how many lives are being ruined, and what are all the human consequences are always shoved aside over some broken windows and stolen goods. It's always amazing that gets. I mean, that's what gets shown on television, because
of course. And then there I am, stocking shelves the next day and wondering,
right.
What am I here?
Right. That's right. Exactly. I love this.
I don't really have comments for this picture. I just love this picture.
I know, I did too. This is, it's maybe not the most profound image, except that, I thought it was a bit of a foil or a contrast to the images of looting and the ideas of like, well, who is a part of these demonstrations? And I think that you and your family have really been wonderful in sort of examining who is there, and the crowds of people. It just is such a gorgeous spectrum of humanity. With your photographs, both capture the rawness of the situation, but also have a lot of tenderness to them as well. And you have an eye for these kinds of images, which I think are so important for people to see.
Yeah, I remember. I exactly don't remember why there was a story behind this bear.
Probably.
This was one of the he was one of the main speakers at the aforementioned little gathering at George Floyd's memorial. I seem to recall that he was from out of state and came in specifically to talk, but the bear does have a story. I just don't have that story for you.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, that's just a teaser for. Let's see. Make sure my mic is back on.
That's just a teaser from the interview. The full-length interview is available on the website for this virtual gallery. Again, the URL is blm@bcc.com, Black Lives Matter at bcc.com. And all of the interviews that you'll see tonight are posted there in their entirety. I'm just going to show some excerpts from some of these so that you'll get a sense of what you can look for, more fully online. Rowin is just such a lovely young man, and his sort of just generous artistic spirit just comes through in this interview so profoundly, but also again in his photographs. There really is, I think, tenderness is the right word for how he approaches his photographic work, and I hope that you get to spend some time with some of these. It really is a different picture of what was happening in Minneapolis on that day. We're going to take a little bit of a musical break. I'm going to present one of our faculty members. Peter Furlan has a big band project, and they've done some masterful work in creating remotely recorded big band sound music. And he performed a piece on the last live stream that we did, and I asked him to surface some more of the goods. So this is a piece from the Peter Furlan project called
Perfidia.
Whew. I had to let the credits scroll for that one because I needed you to be able to see that. Oh man, see who's on that track. That was Peter Furlan, who's playing alto saxophone. He is the leader of that project, and we are blessed to have him as part of our faculty. That was just a fantastic piece. How they manage that in a remote context. I don't care how much mastering and remastering and editing you do. That is really quite a feat to be able to put together a piece like that online. And what a credit to them. What a beautiful sound they make. So I'm really grateful to Peter Furlan Project for that. Please reach out to him and hook him up. Get some CDs from their website, and make sure you support musicians. They get so little from the streaming services, from other sources of revenue. So it's important that if you support local musicians, you support people on our faculty, make sure that you come across with some bread on their website. So hook them up, take care of that. So this next interview that I'm going to run into right now is with my friend Jamal Joseph. Again, he is a professor of film at Columbia University, former Black Panther, and I'm just going to run this for a few minutes. You'll get a sense of this. Again, this is all on our virtual gallery website, blm@bcc.com, but I want to introduce you to Jamal Joseph. So here's our interview.
Man, it's so great to see you. It's just so great to be with you. And you're so busy, and you are so accomplished. And as an artist and as an actor and as an activist, and I am just so pleased to spend this time with you. Again, we've been talking about political process, how one becomes a conscious person, and I think you are in a unique position because like a lot of us, you became politically aware at a very young age, became intensely politically involved in the Black Panther Party at a very young age, and now you're like we were saying before, one of the old heads, now we're passing it on, not that old, but you are you have a theater company, Project Impact, that's just extraordinary. You're around young people now, and you're teaching in the film department at Columbia University. And God, if they could see us, if they could see us back in B Block now in Leavenworth, with this. Right, exactly. I told you he was soft. That's what they say about me, right? It's like I told you he was soft. But no, why don't you? If you could talk about what you see emerging and how you relate that maybe to your own experience, this new consciousness that you see happening on the streets, and what that means to you.
I joined the Panthers when I was 15 years old, and when I joined, it wasn't like I was political and I had studied a lot and that I made this decision that this was the most revolutionary organization at the time, and that's why I was going to become a member of the Black Panther Party. It was driven by passion. It was driven by confusion. When I say confusion, I was on, like many young Black men, trying to figure out what the path of manhood is. It was, and for us looking around on the street corners, even though I was, a good student and had a loving grandmother, Noonie, my adopted grandmother who was raising me, but worried her to death because I was one of these kids that would get good grades but still hang out in the projects that were 5 blocks away, because that's what manhood looked like, having that swagger, getting in people's face. But at the same time, I was a member of the NAACP Youth Council at my church and part of church activities, and Then Dr. King was assassinated. And I got mad and felt that I had a personal relationship with Dr. King because of the work in the NAACP. We did, voters registration, and we collected books and food and supplies for the Freedom Riders. Some of the Freedom Riders came up to visit us. For our audience, those were mainly students from the North, black and white, that spent a summer getting on those buses and riding into segregated bus stations in the South, knowing that when they got off the buses, people would throw rocks, eggs, beat them. In one case, the bus was set on fire, but they put their lives, not only sacrificed their summers or gave up their summers, they put their lives on the line to make change. Not dissimilar for what we saw with the Black Lives Matter protests, and people were amazed at how many white brothers and sisters was out there. I was pleased but not amazed because I had seen what this kind of coalition, united front, looks like. But Dr. King gets killed, and I get mad as hell, and I get caught on the fringes of the rebellion on 125th Street and get pulled out of it to safety by some men who I just knew as militant black men at the time and sent home. And I go to school the next day and I announce to my two best friends, we were hallway monitors. And those are people in the schools that you get out of class early and you stand in the hallway, nobody listens to you, but you get to eat lunch early, you get out early.
There you
So
go.
so my two best friends was a black kid named Phil and a white kid named Paul Kirshner. And I come in the day after and I announced that Eddie Joseph, I hadn't even taken the name Jamal, was going to be a black militant. And I didn't even fully know what that word meant. Phil kind of nods his head, and Paul, my white buddy, looks at me and he says, Eddie, I don't know if you can announce that you're going to be a black militant like it's a career choice, like you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. I was like, no, Paul, you watch, right? So to prove to Paul even more so than myself, I had to now find a militant organization. And and I'm telling this because I'm trying to show you how subjective the process is, right? It was like the black Muslims. And I was like, no, I don't like bow ties. You know, but grandma, she makes those pancakes and bacon every Sunday. I love me some bacon. It was really that subjective. A story came on about the Panthers where the Panthers stormed the state capitol of Sacramento with guns.
Right.
And I'm riveted. And they come in, and the reason why the Panthers did it is because they were changing the gun control laws because of the Panthers. There was a time in California where you could open carry a rifle or shotgun if you didn't have a record. The Panthers carried rifles and shotguns and law books. And when the police would stop someone in the black community, they would be there and stand a legal distance away, 25 feet, whatever the statute said, read the person who was been stopped, read them their rights because the cops weren't going to do it. And then let the cops know we have a right to observe, we have a right to bear arms, and trust me, we have and will use the right to defend ourselves. And this caught the imagination of the black community, shocked the nation. No one had seen people stand up to police brutality and police terror in such a strategic and brave fashion. But this news report was sensational. And I'm like, they're crazy. They went to the white legislature. And then the reporter said, the police pulled over the Black Panthers vehicles and they found more guns and communist literature in the trunk. And I went, they're crazy. They got black leather coats, they got guns, they're communists. I want to join, because when you're 15,
Exactly.
when you're 15, crazy is good.
Well, I can remember the Life magazine. I think for a white person, I was certainly not politically conscious at 15, although 16, 17, it was Vietnam, and I was, in a position to have to start to choose, am I going to go to Vietnam? Am I going to be making that choice? I had already decided, conscientious objector, Canada, whatever, definitely not doing that. But I remember still blazed in my memory as the cover of Life magazine with the picture of the Black Panthers holding shotguns and the berets, the leather jackets, on the cover of this magazine. And I think scared white people to death, man. That was
Yeah,
just,
man. So that was you. So if
mm,
I was going to be a militant, I was going to be that one.
hmm
And as we're riding on the subway to the Panther office, I'm with two older friends. Um, not much older, but when you're younger, you want to hang out with the older dudes.
mm.
Now I don't really want anything to do with older dudes. I like to hang with the young people in my theater. I guess there comes a time somewhere, in your 30s or 40s or so that you're cool with people your age.
Mm.
One of my older friends says, when we get to he says, the Panthers are no joke. It's like the mafia. When you get in, there's no getting out. And I'm like, no getting out. My curfew is 10 o'clock tonight. The other person says, man, the Panthers, they're no joke. You're going to have to kill a white dude to prove yourself. And I'm like, kill somebody? I'm in the church choir. Other friend says, nah, man, you ain't got to kill a white dude. Sigh of relief. Then he says, you've got to kill a white cop. And you have to bring in his badge and his gun. So we go to the office. In hindsight, I think they were hoping that I punked out so they could say, we were going to go, but you were a punk. I wasn't going to be a punk. When we get into the meeting, we're sitting in the back, and I'm looking at all the older brothers and sisters, leather coats, fatigue jackets. Some of the sisters had their African head wraps on. But I'm 15, so yes, they were older, but the Panthers in the office that day were probably 18, 19, 21, 22. Same as the Freedom Riders, same as the anti-war movement. It was young people, youth that were making the revolution. And the person running this meeting, which we call political education classes, was explaining the 10-point program. And if you read it, it talks about housing, it talks about jobs, it talks about healthcare, police brutality, nothing about hating white people or killing cops. But I jump up and I said, choose me, brother. On me. I'll kill a white dude right now. Whole meeting gets quiet. And he calls me up front.
You're too young to be a cop.
Like, yeah, right? This kid is just stupid. Yeah. And very dramatically reaches into this drawer in the desk. And I think he's going to hand me a gun, and he hands me a stack of books. And it was Malcolm X. It was Fanon. Everybody had the little quotations from Chairman Mao, Solar Nights.
Little red book.
Little red book. And I said, I thought this was a test, based on the bad information my boys had given me. I said, excuse me, brother, I thought you were going to arm me. And he said, young brother, I just did. And then as I'm walking to my seat, two key things happened. He stopped me. He said, young brother, since you came in here so mad at white folk, he said, if all of these cops that are in the community brutalizing, murdering, and arresting people were black, and the people being brutalized were white, if the people who own these stores in the community ripping off the community with high prices and spoiled vegetables, rotten meat, were black, and all of the customers and people being ripped off were white, he said, these jive, lying, fascist politicians, if all of them were black and all of the oppressed people were white, would that make things correct? I thought for a second. I said, no, it seems like it would still be wrong. And he said, that's right, young brother. This is a class struggle for human rights, not just a race struggle for civil rights. Study those books. And then before I get to my seat, there are posters, as you can imagine, all on the wall. And what Malcolm X and Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who were the founders of the Panther Party. But I got attracted to the poster of Che Guevara. And it was a quote that Che gave at the United Nations. And I'm looking at this brother with his beret and his fatigues. And the quote said,
at the risk of seeming ridiculous.
That's right.
True revolutionary.
Are guided
by great feelings
of love.
That's my quote too.
This blew my mind.
At the risk of seeming ridiculous, the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. I love Jamal, and you need to hear more of his story about that particular meeting where he's dressed down by the sisters that are in the room and set on a path more towards trying to meet people's needs, which was a lot of what the Panthers did, most of what the Black Panthers did, with the free breakfast programs and the after-school programs that actually the federal government began to co-opt and imitate in the form of Head Start. That actually began with the Black Panthers free breakfast programs. So it was education, it was housing, it was meeting people's needs in the community, and also confronting police brutality. But it was the fundamental struggle to meet people's needs is what made the Panthers so dangerous to the establishment. And you need to continue to hear this interview, which is on our website, and you get to hear the rest of that story, and you'll get to hear what happened at that meeting, and you'll get to hear about Jamal's evolution as an activist and as a significant person in the Black Liberation Movement. With that, I want to move on, since we're moving along here pretty quickly with time, is another interview with another activist who was also part of the Black Liberation Movement, is still very much a part of that. His name is Akinyele Umoja. He's a professor at Georgia State University. He's one of the founders of the Malcolm X grassroots movement. Brother Umoja is on the faculty of Georgia State. He's in the African American Studies Department, and he's been a lifelong community activist and someone who I admire and respect greatly. We talked at length about the differences between the struggles around police brutality as they happened in the 1970s after the time of the Black Panthers, which is when he became active, but into the contemporary time that we're looking at now, some of the differences between the 70s and with the Black Lives Matter protests. So again, I'm going to just show some of this interview, and I hope that you'll pick up the rest of it on the website. I want to welcome my dear friend Akinyele Umoja, Dr. Umoja, who is on the faculty of Georgia State University and past chair of the African American Studies Department, and more importantly is a founder of the New African Peoples Organization and the Malcolm X grassroots movement. And I am so grateful to have you here today, Brother Umoja. Thank you.
Man, yes, great. Brother Tim, it's great to be on here with you, somebody I have a tremendous amount of respect for. So it's great to be here, and it's good to be able to share with your students and academic community there.
Well, I'm really grateful. This is a part of our Black Lives Matter at BCC, Bergen Community College exhibition, and we have a very active and substantial criminal justice program here. It's part of the sociology and social studies program at BCC. We train a lot of future law enforcement officers and people who are headed into law enforcement, and we also are, like so many schools, working around issues of social justice and human rights. And I think all of us have been moved by the events of this last summer. Whether you're an activist or not, it's impossible to not be challenged by the force of the protests in the streets and the realities that are facing the country at this time. And that's why I wanted to reach out to you in particular with your deep, deep history in the Black liberation movement in the United States. I was hoping that you could just tell us a little bit about your background in the struggle, and in particular your work in the intersection around issues pertaining to the police and police violence.
Well, I think it's important conversations now, particularly with so many people going into criminal justice. The institution I work at now, we actually, based upon what happened this summer, the Black faculty have asked for a whole conversation around policing. Our university prides itself on dealing with some of the most critical issues happening in cities. And man, if this ain't one, I don't know. We have our heads in the sand if we can't see. This is one. My history. I'm 66 years old. One of the things that really pushed me into getting involved or being socially conscious was when I was 11. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. I was born in Los Angeles. Actually grew up in Compton, California. And when I was 11, the Watts uprising, many people probably call it a Watts riot, occurred. And I had never seen anything like that in my life. It was just, explosion, things were on fire, people were taking merchandise, the National Guard was brought in. It happened right around the time of my birthday too, my 11th birthday. But as a child, I knew the whole thing was sparked by incident of police misconduct. Police coming in, doing an arrest, driving while black again. And then when the mother came to check on the people who were stopped, the mother was assaulted by cops. And so that caused this explosion. And since that time, there's been so many explosions in my lifetime that are sparked by cases of police misconduct. Mm-hmm. I actually first got politically active in the Black liberation movement, as you mentioned, around the cases of political prisoners, because again, growing up during the 1960s and 70s, a lot of the political leadership of the Black liberation movement were either incarcerated. Some people we know now were assassinated. I think your students might be interested to see the movie about Fred Hampton that's coming out this month, called, I think, Judas and the Black Messiah. They should check that out if they can, showing, the assassination. We know these things aren't, conspiracy theories. They actually happen and they're documented evidence. The students should find out about this thing called COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program of the FBI, where a lot of Black political leaders, many of who were struggling around this police issue in our community, were assassinated. Some were incarcerated, some were forced into exile. And so my first activism was connected with that. But then as I got involved more deeply in the community and trying to organize around the things that affected the Black community in Los Angeles, we constantly had to work around this thing about the police. There were just so many people being killed. I remember in the year 1976, we noted that there were 52 Black people who were killed either by the Los Angeles Police Department or the Los Angeles County Sheriff. 52 people in 1 year, that's one person for every week in a year.
Every week.
Right. Every week in a year. So we noted that during that time. One case that really haunted a lot of us was the case of Miss Eula Love. Mm-hmm. And I think this gets to, so many people discuss today is how do we respond to cases when people are in duress? Do we respond with military force or do we respond with counseling or whatever? But Eula May Love was a woman who was widowed. She was behind on her gas bill. And when people came to cut her gas off, she ran them off with a butcher knife. Now, obviously, she was under some form of duress. So how do we handle that? And then they came, cops came to her house and she was shot. I forgot how many times. And there was a big uproar. We organized in the community around it. And like so many other cases I can remember in my life that we began to mobilize around, nobody was held into account. When I mean the officers who shot her weren't held into account. And I think, that's a problem that persists today. Some of the highlights were one of my best experiences organizing. There's a housing project in Los Angeles called the Nickerson Garden Project. People back in the day would have known it because of the video shot by NWA, Ice-T, and so many groups, all in the same gang, was shot from there.
Right.
It's also the home of the Bounty Hunters, one of the first blood gangs, so-called blood street organizations in Los Angeles. But I think it was I'm trying to remember the year. Maybe it was around 77. There was someone actually shot at one of the housing authority police in Nickerson Gardens. And as Tupac used to say, the police sometimes act like a gang. He said they were the biggest gang out there. And they did that in this case. They came to the housing project in force, and they took half of the residents, and it was 1,000 residents at least in the project. And they lied them, face on the ground, helicopter above, even pregnant women lied face on the ground. And so at that time, I lived not far from there. It was in the Watts section of LA again. And one of a young woman I met who was living there, but was a college student, she contacted several organizations, and our organization was one of the first to respond. We decided what the course of action is. Tom Bradley, who was an African American mayor of Los Angeles at that time, we went to Nickerson Gardens and to meet with the residents about it. He was a former LAPD officer. So we had a petition drive, and we went door to door in that project, and that's some of the best contact I think I've had with folks in my young life. We went door to door because then they began to confront us with some problems.
Well, I'm going to just pull that to a close right now. There was you get a sense of Akinyele's big heart and big spirit, and you're going to get a chance to hear him again next week. If you would like to tune back in at the same time, 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock on Wednesday the 24th, you'll get to hear Akinyele Umoja participate in a panel discussion with some of our BCC faculty members, including Professor Maureen Ellis Davis from the Sociology Department and Professor Rich Cuters from the Criminal Justice Department, and also a special guest, Chief Lawrence Suffern, who's the chief of the Englewood Police Department, is also a member of NOBLE, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. So you'll get to hear us talk about the future of policing in America. It's going to be just a wide open, wide-ranging discussion from various points of view about how to make some progress in changing the nature of policing in this country. So I hope that you'll be able to join us for that. And while I'm doing some announcements. We are part of the Black History Month
celebrations at Bergen Community College. There is one event left. That's also the same day as next week, next Wednesday on the 24th, but early in the afternoon at 1 o'clock. BCC's Randy Green from the Financial Literacy Program is going to be doing a special program, online program called Don't Let Your Money Fall Through the Cracks. And I don't know what could be more important than that, but I think all of us could benefit from that for real. So make sure that you tune into that. You can check out the links on the poster that's available on the Black History Month Committee's part of the BCC website. Also coming up, we have International Women's Day is March 8th. International Women's Month is the entire month of March. And the women's program, the International Women's History Month program, is sponsoring a special writing competition for women, about women, or by women. It's an essay contest about women's experience with COVID-19 and the pandemic, either your own personal experience or about women that you know who have been going through this amazing and just difficult, wrenching pandemic experience. But this is particularly from the women's point of view. And you can get in touch with Professor Christine Eubanks if you'd like to find out more information about this. So make sure that you check that out. And finally, I'm going to be flogging a new program coming from the gallery. You got 2 minutes for art, don't you? Just 2? That's all we ask. We just need 2 minutes for art. Well, for people with short attention spans and an interest in art and want to develop it more, art historian Professor Denise Budd and I are going to be talking stuff about art and trying to do it like a 2-minute drill. And we'll be publishing that on YouTube coming up. We've got a couple of episodes cut, and we'll be presenting that in the very near future. So I hope that you'll check that out very soon. This has been a wonderful experience being a part of this photo exhibition and having a chance both to meet these wonderful photographers, to talk with them at length, explore their images, their art making practice, and then to be a part of these discussions with these longtime community activists about the overarching history of coming to terms with police violence in the Black community, and the relationship of white people, of white activists, of progressive white people, folks who want to make a difference, want to make a change. To be a part of these discussions has been a wonderful honor for me, and I hope that comes through with our virtual gallery, and I hope that you'll get a chance to take a look at that. I have one more musical presentation that I'm going to share with you. This is by Professor Dan Sheehan. He has done a piece from his CD, which is entitled Tales from Earth Incorporated. And this is a piece that he actually recorded with a dear friend of mine who is an mbira player. He plays the African mbira. I have one on my shelf behind me here. Maybe I'll play it for you one of these live streams. But I hope that you'll enjoy this piece. This is by Dan Sheehan.
sent to work at the very mine where my parents would dig from dawn to dusk to deliver the prize that would deliver us from a world of abject poverty. In a highly resource-blessed country. But Mugabe and friends were of different minds and decided to take all that we could find to pay the staggering debts of the TMDC. They took over the mine and now they've taken me. Oh, Kimberly, don't you see? Your roles, they just don't apply to me. Taught from school to work as a government slave. From dawn to dusk, we tear at the land. So a bride can proudly extend her hand, unaware of the dogs and the torture and rape. Holes to dig on either side. One for the bodies and one for the mind. Under cover of darkness, we would blindly dig to find a ticket out amongst the rocks and twigs. But the soldiers won't tolerate any losses. Got to build up a stash to pay their bosses. Unless a pebble or two should happen to slip into the flap of a sack between their belt and hip, in hopes of finding deportation to a nearby Kimberly authorized nation, away from the eyes of Robert Mugabe, neglectful leader of Zimbabwe, who lives with disgrace so exorbitant and leave. Oh, Kimberly, don't you see? Your rules just don't apply to me. Taught for school to work as a government slave. Dawn to dusk, we tear at the land. So a bride can proudly extend her hand, unaware of the dogs and the torture and rape. Down in a hole deep inside of the earth, searching for diamonds of natural birth that could be made quite conflict-free in the safe confines of a laboratory of equal beauty and composition without the need for ammunition. But the brides and grooms feel better knowing that the gems were many centuries growing.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Dan Sheehan, for writing that song, and for Kevin Nathaniel, who is the mbira player on that. All the other musicians that were part of that. It's a really beautiful piece. Very powerful piece. While I was listening to that, I was thinking, and this is my final meditation from Pastor Blanc here, the high priest of Gallery Bergen. So, I truly believe in the transformative power of art. That may be one of the few things that I hold as strong as a religious belief. I know it saved me in prison, and I know that it has changed people's lives and changed consciousness in a way that no other kind of argument, any kind of intellectual conversation can do. There's just nothing as powerful as the music and the painting, the murals, the things that are made by our hands that draw upon materials that we all recognize. And this experience of art helps to connect us, and it helps to draw upon real experiences, real lived experiences. And I really believe that one of the major reasons that so many young white people are part of the Black Lives Movement-led protests, and why this has been such a change over the last 50 years since I began my own anti-racist activism. It has to do with culture and art, and it has to do with the presence of jazz music, of pop music, of hip-hop, R&B, of rap, and this is what's changing the culture from all angles, and it's an undeniable force, and it's creating new human beings that for whom racism doesn't make much sense. And I think this is how, in the long term, a lot of this is going to be figured out. I think a lot of it's going to be by artists, and it's going to take place through these means of human connection. So those are my thoughts, and why we do this at the gallery, why we show these photographs, why we bring these people together in an art gallery. It's not just to show beautiful pictures and create some aesthetic experience. It's to figure out ways to connect each other and have a discussion. So I'm glad that you were able to join me and join us here in our cloud-based virtual Gallery Bergen for this evening. And I hope that this was a good experience, and I hope to hear from you. I hope that you will be tuning into the Gallery Bergen website. Again, the website for this virtual gallery is BLM at bcc.com, and you'll find pretty much everything that we showed you tonight is present there on our virtual gallery. So with that, thank you for joining us, and good night.